Hello, everybody. We will give everyone a moment to join, and we shall get started in 10 seconds. I see a nice crowd joining. I've seen many of you back at the Sands Coffee Talk, which was great, that fireside chat about AI and cybersecurity. We're here to continue that discussion. And we have some nice representation from the government, from agencies, from the education space. I'm seeing critical infrastructure, medical and financial as well. Great, we have some good representation. So let's get going. Let's get started. So this is me, Eric Avigdor. I'm Vice President Product Management in Votiro. Aviv, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi everyone. It's great to have you here, and of course to have that chat today. Good morning. I'm Aviv Grafi. I'm the founder and CTO of Votiro. I'm based in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Let's get going. So we're here to take a deep dive into three things. And if we want you to take away three takeaways from this session, they're really about the usage of AI, risks with using AI, cybersecurity, and how cybersecurity can leverage AI to mitigate some of those risks. And we'll finish with a bit of what Votiro does and how Votiro uses AI and machine learning and how potentially we can help you address some of these challenges that we're seeing. So let's get going. If my slide deck will agree with me, there you go. Aviv, do you want to start with kind of how Votiro started? Tell us the story.
Sure. So I founded Votiro a while ago. In terms of my background, actually, as I mentioned, I'm based in Israel, so I served in one of the intelligence units here in Israel when I was 18, and after doing a service mostly around security, offense, and defense operations, I went to work for a couple of startups, and then I opened my own thing, and I started with the services, with the security audits for companies around the world. And I was traveling. It was quite fun for 20-something years old. And one of the things I noticed is that everywhere I go, every security audit I was doing, I found that there was actually one technique that was working for me 100% of the time to show the customer where they're vulnerable. And actually, probably there are plenty of techniques for that, but that specific technique was around sending a malicious resume, document to the recruiting department saying, hey, I want to actually apply to work in a company, and here's my resume. And on the other side, there is a guy or lady that their work is to actually to scan and screen all those hundreds of resumes a week. And the problem is that at the same time, the security team tell them, look, you need to watch out before you open certain content, before you access certain resources. And I think this is one of the problems and one of the dilemmas that a lot of employees and users, they have the tension between security as threat prevention and productivity as business efficiency. And I think that actually leveraging that, and the bad guys are doing that very well. Actually, I think that's one of the most significant problems that I decided that I want to solve. And this is the philosophy behind what is Votiro today.
Yeah, and I think a great example is we were speaking with a prospect yesterday and heard about a big bank, very large bank, about a business limitation they have. They've decided in order to mitigate cyber risk, in order to reduce the risk from a zero-day attack, what they've basically put in place as a policy that files cannot be exchanged over Teams and over no cloud storage is used. So files are only exchanged over email. Now, that is a significant limitation that is put on users and in many ways is limiting efficiency of any business process, right? So back to Aviv's point, how do we allow using AI, machine learning, and other techniques. How do we allow content to be exchanged freely is a big dilemma.
And I think what you raised is extremely important because we see a lot of organizations actually tightening their business process because of security. And sometimes the security guys are being, uh, thought as the cops that actually, traffic cop that actually cannot allow anything in, or in the prospect that you met yesterday, they just, let's forbid all the file exchange from outside. That's practically hinder the productivity, which is a major problem. And I think in Votiro philosophy, and the reason why I founded Votiro is to allow businesses to work, not necessarily stop things from getting into organization, but really allow the users to open anything they need without the need to think twice.
Security as an enabler.
Yeah.
So before we move on, the chat is open for anyone to comment on, if you're seeing some gaps and limitations on where you're holding back efficiency and productivity. Share that with us. Comment, ask questions, we can answer them later, or just share with this nice crowd that we have, maybe ways that you found to solve those user experience limitations, I put it that way. So we're seeing a couple of trends in the past, say, 12 months in the market. The first one is really the first one really has to do with what Aviv mentioned, which is the zero-day dilemma. How do we solve that? There are so many zero-day attacks being launched into the market lately. How do you deal with that without holding back and stopping productivity? The second problem, which is a derivative of that same problem, is we've become so paranoid for the right reasons, obviously. We're being constantly under attack, that we've built so many systems that exist in the SOC today for security operation teams to have visibility into challenges, into identity challenges and data challenges and malware based attacks and challenges. And we have so many indicators, and what that actually leads to is a whole lot of false positives as well. There are so many alerts which are now not only visibly surfacing as a challenge, but surfacing as a mental challenge, and we're seeing actually churn within the CISO roles and SOC roles, where we're seeing folks quit their jobs because it's just not manageable anymore. Alert fatigue, burnout, we know the story. And we'll talk about this later, one of our missions in Votiro is to reduce that noise, is to build cybersecurity capabilities and to leverage AI and machine learning in order to reduce that noise so SOCs can be more efficient at doing their job without being bombarded with too much information. And this leads us into that third trend that we're seeing a whole lot lately, which is everyone is trying to use AI and machine learning. We'll talk about the differentiation between the two, AI, machine learning, deep learning, in a second, but I will mention this. It is incredibly amazing to me to see that 3 out of 4, and this is a constant number in the past 3 years, 3 of 4 companies are prioritizing AI and machine learning projects over other IT projects. So when you look at the level of priority that companies are assigning to any business process that has AI or machine learning tied into it, that is prioritized high top on the list beyond any other, in some cases even above cybersecurity projects. Now, when you take a look at that bottom right chart, just as a reference, that's a bubble chart that shows you where AI and where automation is being used using machine learning in order to do many things. One of the 2 things that clearly stand out is, number 1, AI and machine learning is used for customer experience. So think anything that has to do with chatbots, with simplifying a customer's interaction with your company, support use cases. How do you provide an enhanced user flow and customer experience flow using machine learning, mainly through chatbots, but also through additional capabilities? And then a second massive trend is everything that has to do with process automation. How do we make our sales process more automated? How do we make our marketing process, our engineering process more automated using AI and machine learning capabilities, support processes? what you're hearing here, what I'm not saying, and this is really the interesting part, is that if these two main trends, customer experience and process automation, are the two main drivers for AI and machine learning projects, where is cybersecurity, right? What is going on in that field? And I can tell you from what we're seeing, the cybersecurity field is packed with thousands of AI machine learning projects, and let's dive into that, which is why we've got together here today. So quick primer on AI machine learning. Just to cover the 30-second basics on, just so we don't convolute and confuse different terms. AI is a big term. AI is the umbrella term that has been coined to define a way for us to mimic human cognitive behavior with machines, with computers. That's an umbrella term. We need to be cognizant of that, because when we really talk about AI, most AI nowadays really means machine learning, which is a subset of AI. So what is machine learning? Machine learning is the ability to define a model, a mathematical model that runs on a very large data set, and to continuously feed it with data in order to train a model that would eventually become better at calculating the probability of something, or would be able to make a decision based on that very large amount of data. Machine learning is really what is being used today, mainly in the cybersecurity space. We're not there yet with what is called full-blown artificial intelligence. But if we dive slightly deeper into deep learning, that's where we use the same models as with machine learning, but we use neural networks in order to self-improve the model itself and to self-improve its learning capabilities. And examples can be everything we're seeing in the market now with generative AI and large language models, which are being used in different ways. So let's move on now that we have covered those basics. Aviv, tell us a little bit about cybercrime.
Sure. So is the way I see that on the last few years, I think there were a few trends, or there was some movement that definitely AI contributes to it. So the first one, it took a while with cybercrime. Actually, when it was started, it was highly specialized. It was mainly attributed to nations or organizations that they required a lot of budget. That was the story of probably of years ago. Obviously, over the years, the AI actually became more commodity. And actually, we see that a lot of the cybercrime, of course, thanks to back then to the crypto trend, became now way more commoditized. It's definitely more than ever. And I think the two things that we can see there. One is that if you all remember all those phishing campaigns, phishing email with some broken language and stuff, we see that a lot of those campaigns are actually leveraging AI. This is one. The second thing, how we actually automated discussions, or you know, those pseudo random discussions. We want to learn someone to do something. So if you think about maybe a hacker that actually would use a chat GPT to automate a discussion, exactly as organization doing with customer service chat, right? Chatbot. It can be done the same when you want to learn someone to do something. So we see a lot of bad guys actually leveraging those new tools and technologies, which are cheap. I mean, you can actually license that pretty like easily, and you can train your model actually to be wiser and lure the victim to do stuff that you want. So we see that AI actually helped the cybercrime to become way more commodity than ever, and that actually help those bad guys to create that as a cybercrime as a service. And one thing that I want to mention is, of course, that example when the bad guys actually taking AI and of course, using those language models. So there is one example that, Eric, if you can just hit one click. So yeah, go for it. Yep. So one example that landed in my mailbox a while ago is that all those phishing email now looks very genuine. So there's no broken English anymore. We see that a lot of the colors, everything is being copied. And in fact, if I would be continuing and clicking on some stuff, I would see genuine pages which were copied, and everything looks pretty nice. And it's really easy to fall into those traps. So this is one technique that the bad guys are using. This is one. Now, I want to show you some stuff around machine learning where it doesn't work. some of the detection that techniques that we have there, and of course, some of you know that famous article or paper launched several years ago, is that machine learning, it used to be, relying on, for example, computer vision, saying, what do I have in front of me? And the challenge with what do I have in front of me is that is as good as your data set. So if, for example, you train, if we all know those capture images that we need to actually to find the crossroads or the trucks or the bridges. We're actually helping Google to train their model, but it's as good as the data set. And for example, in this case, a school bus, which can edit a noise to it, can be now be detected and be understood as someone completely different. And that's the problem with machine learning and AI, where it's as good as your training data set. Now, what the LLM and the all the invention on the last 18 months and couple of months we're good at is that they actually learn how to take those neural network and really encapsulate that with tons of data, with not terabytes but petabytes of data, and build that model upon it. So this is a significant advantage and advance in the technology, yet it's just as good as the data set. So this is one example of how you can trick machine learning if you're a bad guy. And if I would go to the next slide.
Yeah, and Aviv, just before we move on, we'll go back to this in a few minutes when we talk about what Gartner's realizing now. While we're talking here about buses and ostriches, this has a very clear and very actionable list of things that need to be done within companies, and we'll get to that in a few minutes.
Yeah. So we will touch on that. And of course, there are plenty of online example, how you can actually trick all those models. So one thing we learned, we cannot really rely on those AI models, blindly. So yet we still need to make sure that data that we train our model with is actually accurate, and not less important, also safe, because that's also an aspect where security actually touch on when we talk about AI. So when we are talking with customers and prospects in the industry, we see that a lot of them are still concerned with the things that we learned that they're concerned on the last few years. For example, the ransomware as a service. Obviously, it's still happening. We see in certain verticals, some of the government, some of the medical and health, they're still being hit by ransomware over and over again. And now it's, as the last few years were as a service, it's pretty easy to getting. Same goes for phishing. We're getting text messages, we're getting email messages. And in fact, what have you mentioned, Eric, that also is now becoming pretty common to get phishing kits through other channels. If we talk about Slack, we talk about Teams file exchange, we're talking about Box and Dropbox. The bad guys are leveraging all those new sources of content actually to bypass a lot of the traditional detection systems that exist for years. And they know that not all security solution can really cover all kind of sources, definitely from new modern file collaboration platforms. And of course, we'll still see the botnets out there.
And I think that that is something we're hearing constantly every day. That we speak with large and mid-market companies, and while some use cases are perceived to be covered well, there are many additional channels that folks are always surprised about. The fact that, oh wow, we thought we had email covered, but what about collaboration tools? What about our SaaS applications? What about our file transfers? What's going on there, right? Could we be phished, as Aviv mentioned, through one of these other channels? And yeah, it is happening every day. Some of them most interesting new attacks. And let's talk about one. Let's talk about Cassano. I know many of you in the audience are banks, insurance companies, financial institutions. This specific attack was initially targeting mainly financial institutions, initially mainly in Latin America, but that expanded way beyond that in the past few months. So let's talk about how that attack activates, and let's talk about how AI and machine learning actually helps hackers progress such an attack. So I'll take you through, and again, at a very, very high level, let's not dig into the details. We're trying to keep this short and sweet. So it all starts with a very basic phishing campaign, usually with a spear phishing campaign, sending an email that looks super legitimate, that carries an HTML file in it. Most of you must have seen lately many attacks or attack attempts starting with an HTML file. And we've seen with very good probability most Cassano attacks starting with that HTML file coming in through a very legitimate phishing email. How is it phishing? Because obviously AI and machine learning are being used in order to make the email look more legitimate, to sound as if it is coming from a trustworthy source. What happens is that you click on that HTML file and it basically takes you to a malicious domain. On that malicious domain, you are prompted to download a file, which in most cases, again, with the Cassano attack, is a zipped archive, a password-protected zip or RAR file. Now, why is that? So this is a critical point. Most defenses that are deployed today within large enterprises are AV and sandbox based and EDR based. And in those cases, the ability to dig into a password protected file is non-existent. Try us out, go to VirusTotal, test it with a zipped archive malicious file, which is weaponized. None of the AV vendors will actually catch that weaponized file, which has been password protected. It will be deemed clean and safe by 100% of the AV vendors in the market. So let's not mislead ourselves by thinking that our AV is actually catching those. So what many companies do is they either choose to completely block zipped password protected files, which on its own is a problem, right? That is limiting efficiency, or to just pass it through because there's nothing we can do. So AI and machine learning can be used in order to find the best possible techniques in order to bypass and circumvent your existing technology stack, both by how we're encrypting a file, what content or how deep within that file structure should we place a malicious piece of code in order to trick and circumvent your software. So continuing on to with this attack chain, a zipped archive is sent, it opens up, it detonates, it explodes on the endpoint. And what it does is that it leverages a few techniques, UEC bypass, in order to increase your admin privileges on an account. It executes the malware in order to start sniffing and pulling and discovering and harvesting basically email addresses of additional recipients within that organization. And that is the beginning and the starting point for a massive mal spam attack, basically delivering malware to a large audience within that same organization. AI and machine learning can be used by hackers in order to build that software efficiently, even to some extent build software with very little engineering power, because now we have machine learning and large language models building that malware for us. And later on in the attack, using that machine learning in order to craft tailored messages per individual that would make it more likely for them to be successful in that attack. So moving quickly on to what do we do with this? I mean, we're seeing a problem here, right? We're seeing zero-day attacks growing and increasing in size and importance. We're seeing bad actors leveraging AI and machine learning. So what can we do? What can us vendors and us companies in the market do in order to leverage AI and machine learning to better protect against those trends? Yeah. Aviv, do you want to walk us through some use cases?
Yeah, I think before we jump into the actual how we protect, I think just to set the scene, we need to talk about three pillars of use cases of AI today. So the first use case is obviously consumer AI. We're all familiar with the ChatGPT part and all the great things that some of us are actually using. That's mostly for consumers. We know that the search engine, we have that wars, Microsoft and Google and others. This is one thing that we're not gonna dive into today. The two other pillars are security AI, is obviously how we enhance the security processes. For example, how do we assist the SOC to be way more efficient, actually to focus on the things that they do need to do, and now we surface things that they need to look at. Obviously, around security analytics, how we actually leveraging AI to really find the privacy and data privacy issues, and of course, anomaly detection, how we surface those things thanks to AI technology. So this is one pillar. And of course, another pillar is how enterprises are using AI today. So obviously, for customer support, customer service, training AI with the enterprise data, how they usually interact with customers, with clients, that actually highly valuable. And of course, how they improve digital processes using the power of neural networks and those models. And of course, those are the two pillars that I think that are more important for our audience today. So we're going to focus on that.
Now, I know we're just scratching the surface here. We're skimming very high level on, flying high over some of these topics. FYI, Evan is posting on the chat. Evan is posting links to some articles that dive much deeper that, we've posted and others have posted on some of these topics if you'd like to dive a bit deeper. I'd like to point out an interesting fact or a realization that Gartner came to lately, which actually, if we draw a parallel to the cloud security space, think about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? Where cloud infrastructure became massive, right? And many companies started leveraging SaaS applications. It was no longer just Salesforce or Salesforce and ServiceNow. It's now hundreds of SaaS applications being used. But what was the share of responsibility between the enterprise using these technologies and the vendors, right? The SaaS vendors, so or the cloud infrastructure vendors. What happened was that it was fair to assume that the cloud vendors would deal with their own security and some level of security that had to do with how you log in and the privileges, the access privileges you have within that environment. But the data that you share on that platform, that's your problem. That is, we don't deal with that. Us vendors, us platforms, we don't deal with that. That is your Mr. Enterprise. That is your problem to deal with. How do you secure that data? And what evolved is a shared responsibility model, which developed throughout many years in what pieces of that stack would be dealt by the infrastructure, the cloud vendors versus the SaaS vendors versus the enterprise using that product. What's interesting now is that the same exact discussion is happening with AI. Think about it. We're using now AI in many different ways. In some cases, we're using full-blown AI services, packaged, well-packaged. We just, we subscribe to them and we use them, and it's all baked in. On the other end of the spectrum, you have companies building their own machine learning models, training with their own data, and then you have in between a broad variety of options of services you can acquire in the market. The challenge is that in many of these use cases, that core data that you use, the core data that you harvest in order to improve your business process or to improve your customer experience or your security stance, your data is still your problem, right? Which is honestly not the best approach. And what Gartner is now coming out with is a new model called TRISM. And what TRISM stands for is Trust, Risk, and Security Management for AI platforms. And it basically poses a shared responsibility model that says, look, infrastructure vendors cannot totally own the security of the data that you use to train your models. You don't have the means currently to totally own them. So let's find a mutual understanding on how we can work together, vendors and infrastructure and IaaS infrastructure vendors and enterprises, to truly keep that data safe. With that, I want to talk quickly about a really, really important concept. We've done this, and I'm sure that many of you on this call are doing this as well. You found a business process, you found something that requires a research project for how do we use AI and machine learning to improve that business process or that customer experience project. And I think the massive and most important and probably the most difficult piece is gathering that data. That can take months, it can take years, gathering that data and building a database of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of data points that can train that model and make it more efficient. You take that data and you pour it into an S3 bucket or into any cloud storage. What you don't know is whether that data is safe. And it is impossible to sift through millions of files in order to determine whether that data is safe from a malware perspective and whether that data is true and will not skew your model to provide erroneous results, and whether that data doesn't contain privacy-related information, PII. So how do we provide that visibility to dig into the data sets that you provide your machine learning models so you actually succeed in using artificial intelligence and machine learning? And one of the things that we've been focusing on in Votiro is, for example, sanitizing files, initially from malware-related threats, but in the coming few weeks, privacy-related threats as well. So that data, that unstructured data that you upload into your S3 bucket or into any one of your preferred cloud storages would be safe from both malware threat and privacy-related threat. So my first call to action to you all is, when you go back to your day jobs, go back and ask the engineers working on those machine learning projects. Ask them what they use, what cloud storage they use, what unstructured data they use in order to train those models, and just ask yourself, how safe and how many security processes do we truly have around those to ensure that when that data is used, it is not, by the way, infecting many machines and servers. Aviv, I think you're on mute, but I'd like to hand this one over to you.
So I want to talk for the next 60 seconds about the other aspect. You talked, Eric, about obviously about the enterprise AI and the risk with feeding those models with malicious data or with something with a PII. And of course, that's one aspect. The other aspect, how we actually want to adopt AI machine learning for assisting security products. One of the examples that I want to show you today is one of the samples that I fetched from VirusTotal. For those of you not familiar with VirusTotal, that's probably the largest database of malware samples in the world. The company owned by Google, and practically they have a data for almost every malware sample with the statistics on how the traditional detection system out there detect that and exactly when after the inception of that sample. So this specific one, that's a Word document that contains a macro. We all know those VBA nasty macros that lure the user actually to enable macros, and that's it. It's actually practically it executes a code on the machine. Now, what we learned over the last probably 5 and 10 years in the industry, that most of those vendors actually they all hosted in VirusTotal, and they look at the results of each other. So the way that today AV vendors, which practically the underlying technologies in most of the security solutions today, like underlying Sophos technologies and McAfee and Microsoft and Symantec, Broadcom, and all those detection engines, they're all relying on trying to find the sample probably not way later after the other vendor in the pool of VirusTotal. That's the way it works in the industry today. Now, in this specific example, you can see that detection graph. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there is date underneath the graph saying from the day that this document actually was found in the wild, initially only, probably a handful or less than 10 engines out there were able to detect that as flagged as malicious. But over time, it took days for the other popular detection out there and detection engines out there, like the Microsoft, the Sophos, the Fortinet of the world, to really find that malicious sample and really flag that and block it. Now, this actually demonstrates the problem of how hackers are generating tons of new samples within, using a click of a button, and the race that the detection technologies out there cannot really cope with that pace. Now, we understand that it takes time for them to detect that, but if we will leverage AI and machine learning within our technology, maybe we can be as fast as the bad guys. So the way that we thought about the problem is, instead of trying to find malicious document, let's identify how safe micro actually looks like. So in fact, we apply the meaningful use of AI to try and identify safe macros in files. And it's actually turning the problem on its head. And instead of trying and chase the bad stuff, which is endless, we know what is the good stuff. So we built a model that actually we did that training over time, and in fact we're able to significantly increase the protection rates for our customers. So even if there is a macro today that is out there, we can actually in zero time know that this is a malicious macro, because we know how a good macro looks like. And this is one of the techniques how you can use AI and ML in order to apply this in a different way than what we used to think until now.
Yeah, I think it's important to reiterate and say this again and again and again. 6 weeks into this attack that Aviv presented here, 6 weeks into it, more than half of the AV vendors still don't recognize that as a threat. Now, we're not talking about, if you look at the list on the right-hand side, we're not just talking about the Dr. Webbs and Icaruses. Microsoft is not recognizing that yet as a threat. That is the mission that we are out to solve. Finding risks deep inside files and making sure that your content is safe. So I want to finish up. We're pretty much we're up on time. I just want to give you a very quick high-level view of where does Votiro sit within your IT stack, within your cybersecurity projects. So once again, what Votiro does, we sanitize files. We are file experts. We deep dive into over 180 file types in order to identify known and unknown threats. And that's super important. We do not detect threat, which is a known threat. We detect known and we remove unknown threats as well. We detect, we disarm, and we analyze risks within unstructured data, within files. Where that unstructured data is, it is everywhere. It is in your email, on collaboration tools, Teams and Slack, in your data lakes, in SaaS applications, in storage, in cloud storage. Now, if you think about your IT budgets or your IT projects, where you focus your time, we break it down into several different areas, and we'll leave aside for a moment your GRC projects and privacy and identity and access management, which also occupies your time. But just talking about the top 3 that we're seeing on the top, right? And them being endpoint security, email security as one, edge projects, basically deploying SSE and SASE capabilities, and cloud and SaaS security, which are 3 very big trends and projects that we're seeing in the past few years in the market. Now, bundle those with the one you're seeing underneath, which is the SOC, security operations. So how do we use more SIM, SOAR, and MDR capabilities in order to simplify the work of our SOC so we can truly focus on what matters? Votiro really augments every single one of these projects, because what we do is we've found a gap. We found that when you rely on SSE and SASE for security at the edge, what that lacks is the context of risks within files. Files are the lifeblood of the digital business. Files are everywhere. They carry 99% of the risk of any cyber attack. Most cyber attacks starts just like Cassano with a malicious file dropped in your email, in your Teams deployment, in your cloud storage. And every one of these capabilities lacks that context to provide you the assurance that the files your users consume is safe. We integrate into all of that, into that entire environment to ensure that files are always safe to be used, and we do that in real time. So while you currently might be waiting minutes or days or weeks for a file to be released from a sandbox, that in most modern use cases is no longer needed, as the file will be sanitized and safe to be used within milliseconds. Aviv, and obviously, if you want to hear more about that, reach out to us and we can talk about that. Aviv, any closing notes?
So I think when I started Votiro, my vision and my philosophy, and still my philosophy, is to allow users to work and actually to solve that problem of the tension between security and productivity. And I think that what we talked about today is how we really, by sanitizing and disarming threats within content and documents and files, no matter where they come from, within milliseconds, is really allowing employees to just open any document they want, any content they need to consume, like the recruiter, the HR guy or lady that I talked about, that I was sending them those malicious resumes. They can just open the resume without any need to think twice, because that copy of the resume is sanitized, it's safe for use, exact same look and feel. So that actually solved that problem. So you can actually tell your users and employees, just open anything. I mean, don't worry about that. That's fine, because it's only went through Votiro. And from the SOC perspective, they don't need to chase all those alerts, because we actually delivered, Votiro helped them to deliver to the end users safe documents, safe files, safe content, no matter where they came from. So that's for me that's the life mission, and of course that's what we offer our customers in Votiro.
Well said. Prevention instead of detection. I believe that is all we had for you. I'd like to call out, obviously, there's a lot of content that Evan posted on our chat. There's a link here for if you'd like to try out Votiro for free and to play around and see how we remove unknown threats, which is our, our secret sauce. So that's interesting. And I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much.